The federal government is set to announce a package to help customers of a collapsed funeral fund that's left thousands of people without cover. National Consumer Affairs reporter Amy Bainbridge joins us now from Melbourne. Amy, g'day. So what's the background to this, and tell us about the work that you've done in this area over several years.
Hi Joe. Well, this company, originally called the Aboriginal Community Benefit Fund, was set up in the early 1990s expressly to provide funeral insurance to Indigenous Australians. But its conduct over the years, over those decades, has been in the spotlight. A lot of what we have uncovered through the ABC's reporting. It's faced numerous challenges from ASIC, the corporate regulator, as well as a challenge from New South Wales Fair Trading, looking at its operations. In total, there were 4 companies set up under the ACBF banner. Joe, you might recall during the Banking Royal Commission, this company was again in the spotlight over the way it sold policies to customers, giving the impression to many people, many we have spoken to as well, that it was owned and run by Aboriginal Australians, when in fact it wasn't. It was set up by a UK-born businessman, and later on there were some Indigenous staff. However, they were certainly not the majority for most of the time that it operated. Look, after the Banking Royal Commission, new rules came in about how it could sell policies. It was unable to get a financial services licence, and from April 2020 had been unable to sell more policies to people. So the writing really was on the wall in many ways for the business to continue to operate. It wasn't able to get new customers, yet people were still passing away and it was having to pay out on policies. It rebranded to Youpla after the Banking Royal Commission. Management and ownership did change, but eventually the group of companies collapsed in March this year, leaving about 14,500 current active customers without funeral cover. And the federal government has now stepped in to say that they are going to guarantee policies for the next 18 months while they try and work out an overall resolution for the company and for the thousands of First Nations Australians impacted by its collapse, Joe.
Yeah, and so how, the announcement on this is still to happen. I think there's a media conference at midday today. But as you understand it, how is this going to work? And is it likely to be a fair resolution of the situation, considering how much money people have put into this fund over the years, if the government is only guaranteeing the payout from these policies for a certain period?
Well, it's very much a transitional arrangement, Joe. The government has not said that this is the end of it. In fact, it's just an interim measure to try and get people through this period where, unfortunately, sadly, people are passing away. And since the collapse of the company, they've been unable to redeem any money from their policies. So basically, the government is stepping in to act as the insurer for this transitional arrangement. They estimate that there will be around 500 people they will need to help over the next 18 months or so. And the average policy is worth about $8,000. So people who experience bereavement in the next 18 months, who are active customers of Youpla, ACBF, as of the 1st of April 2020, they will be able to access this government scheme to ensure we don't see these situations where people are having to borrow money, access their super, work extra jobs, crowdfund to pay for funerals within their communities, which can cost thousands of dollars. And that's why people signed up in the first place, was so that they wouldn't be leaving their families with debt should they pass. So, Joe, you make a good point. I mean, it's not the resolution, though. It's very much an interim measure until they work out how to help all of the customers going forward from here.
And how have the laws changed in this area over the years since this story emerged?
Well, the biggest flashpoint, I guess, I mean, this comes after various court cases against the company scrutinising the conduct of salespeople in Aboriginal communities where they went out and door knocked. They often employed as some subcontractors local Indigenous people who knew communities really well and went door to door and sold policies. There were various court challenges about that, but the Banking Royal Commission was really what broke this open in many ways. There'd been various reporting over the years, but looking at the conduct Tracy Walsh was one of the key witnesses who we interviewed for one of our first stories after the collapse on this. About how they sold the policy, how they bought the policies, how they were sold the policies, and what they understood they meant. Most people thought that they were signing up to some sort of savings fund.
Right.
The name was Aboriginal Community Benefit Fund. People thought they were putting money into a fund that was going to also help Indigenous projects, community projects across Australia, when in fact that wasn't the case. And most people didn't understand really what insurance is, and that if you stop paying, the money doesn't sit there for you. Actually, you've got to keep paying, otherwise you won't have access to that benefit. So after the Royal Commission, to answer your question, Joe, there were new rules around funeral insurers. They were required to get an Australian Financial Services licence, so another licence that you needed to have to actually sell these policies, and they've been unable to get one since April 2020. So, as I said earlier, have been unable to get new customers and therefore grow the business any further.
And what are advocacy groups saying so far about this government initiative?
Joe, it's been warmly welcomed, it must be said. I mean, advocates have been working so hard on this issue right across Australia. There's been a coalition of consumer groups really trying to get action on this, particularly obviously since we've had a new government. They're very happy about this first step. And they're saying, look, they look forward to consulting more and doing more work on this, because there are some challenging times ahead. This certainly is not the end of it by any stretch. There are going to be other people out there still feeling like they're in limbo, wondering what's happened to the thousands of dollars they've paid to this company over the years. But this at least will get people through this interim period where the company has collapsed, but there was no one to pay out on policies. And now the government is stepping in to do that. So very much called a welcome first step at this stage, Joe.
Yeah, and Amy, will we be able to see some stories from you online later today on this issue?
There's a story on the ABC website as of this morning.
Yeah.
We'll do some updates throughout the day, Joe, and there'll be a package on the evening news tonight as well.
Okay, Amy Bainbridge, our Consumer Affairs reporter there in Melbourne.